There's a natural way of living in this physical world that few know about. A small number of the population understands these natural laws fully and they live extraordinary lives. These people have conscious control over their lives. There is an organization to life. It's not just random. This video is a basic understanding of how thoughts turn into things and a science on how you create your reality consciously or by default. If you will understand what I'm telling you here, then you will have control over your life and experiences. If you are not aware of this process, manifestation still happens, but you will be a victim to circumstances outside of your control. This is living by default. Learn this process. People have done it. It's only a formula. Okay, so this is a basic diagram of a conscious process of manifestation. I say conscious because this is a conscious being and how this works with them as opposed to somebody who's living by default. So when I say basic, there's really a lot that goes on in here, but I'm just going to kind of break this down in these little separate modules here, so this way you can see what's actually happening on the big picture. But with the big picture, everything is so connected that it happens immediately, so there's really no time or space in between what's going on. So you understand this better. That's why I'm breaking this down in this format. And then later on in other videos, I explain how and what goes on between your desires, your vortex of desires, and your thoughts. And I'll explain it in more detail. So we're going to start with desires first, and that's the blue arrow on the left side of your screen. So your desires have been saved up. I guess you can say it's saved up. It's just accumulation of desires from even past lifetimes. And of course, this lifetime too, of all the things that you've been asking for. So we're going to start with desires, which is a vortex of desires, which all your desires are saved up and just waiting for you to express, waiting for you to receive. Desires are kept in a form of vibrations, which are beyond our senses, so we can't see them, but we can definitely feel them. And those vibrations are immediately sent out. And if you are open to receiving them, then the vibrations turn into thoughts. And thoughts can become words. So you're in conversation with somebody and you have a thought and then you express it with your words. It's that simple. Also, the thoughts, they can turn into words, and also it turns into action, meaning that you have a thought, you have an idea, and that idea is to maybe go to the store and get something, and while you're at the store you meet somebody there, and that person becomes somebody you're going to have a relationship with, or somebody who wants to fund your business. It's taking action. That's what it's doing. And like I said, the action part happens after, its vibration becomes a thought. Then you have this thought, this action to go to the store, and then that's when you meet the people. So there's a process involved here. So when you have your desires, everything is organized for you. Everything is set up. The stage is set. So when you do take the action, that action is, like I said, it's all set up for you. All the people that are playing their parts, you're playing your part in their reality, and everything is set up. The universe, or whatever you want to call it, has all the information, knows everything everybody's talking about and what they're thinking and what they're doing and where they're going, and it puts it all together, and it sets up this perfect situation for you to achieve your desires, and also for them to achieve their desires, because if you're both in that non-resistant realm, then you're both going to achieve your desires. Also, thoughts can become manifestation right away, immediately. So an example would be, You're thinking about somebody, you get a phone call, and you pick up the phone, and they're on the other side, they're on the other line. So it's more than a coincidence that things like that happen. And I'm sure that's happened to you multiple times. Okay, so now that you've had your thought, it's a new thought coming in, and that turns into action, let's say. Then you have a new experience, because let's say you're talking to this person and they're going to become your new partner in your relationship. So now you're going to have a new experience with this person. Every time you have a new experience, you're in the unknown. Anytime you have a new experience, you're in the unknown, and now you're going to have contrast. So contrast isn't bad. Some people think contrast is bad because you might have a contrasting moment, like say a car accident or something. And yes, that can happen, but it doesn't have to be like that. And especially when you start learning this process, then you're going to start eliminating a lot of those situations where the contrast becomes extreme. So in this scenario, now you have a new relationship, you're having a new experience, you have contrast, or maybe you two aren't agreeing on something. And because you're not agreeing, you're starting to get a little bit emotional there, and you're starting to feel, this is not what I want. And then you start to feel right away, this is what I want. So that's what the contrast is for. So you can find out what you want from what you don't want. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can both agree. If you're disagreeing on something, you can both agree to disagree. And that's a contrast. And then from that point on, if you both agree to disagree, now you've worked it out, and now it goes back into a new desire. Okay, so here's contrast, and now it's going back into the new desires, because this is the new information that you got, which is good information, and it's going back into desires, which can be a solution. Now you're back into desires again with a new solution, with some new information. And then again, with that new information, it creates a vibration and it's sent out again, and it goes through the whole process all over again. But this time it's new. This time you've got a new beginning to work with. And so the process repeats. And the whole idea of this manifestation process is so you can grow. You can go from desires to thoughts, into action, to a new experience in the contrast, and then back to desires. But it doesn't go back into desires as it did when it went out. So it's always going to be something new. And when it's something new, that means you're growing and you're becoming more of who you were before. So this is an ideal conscious process of manifestation. The next design I'll show would be manifesting from default. And so the process is different because usually people are manifesting, they're still manifesting, but they're usually manifesting the same thing over and over again. And that's why their life looks the same every day. That's it for this design. So what I said before is this is really basic, and I'm going to go into a lot more detail on other videos on how you can understand this better, and also how you can put yourself in the receiving mode and how you can be more conscious of this type of manifestation. And I guarantee you, your life is going to change tremendously. Here's a diagram of somebody living by default from the material world. So you can see the blue arrow that's pointing to desires, and so everybody has desires, so even somebody living by default, they still have desires. Now, whether the desires get to them, that's into their five-sensory world, that's another story. But anyway, we're going to go through this. So you can see the blue arrow there facing or pointing to desires. So let's just say that they have a desire of making $100,000. Okay, so that's their main desire. So that desire is in a vibrational form, and it's sent out. It's sent to you, ready to be received by you. If you have resistance and you can't accept this vibration, meaning that there's contradiction. So if you want $100,000, but you really don't believe it, you're thinking, I really want this $100,000, but I don't think I can have it. It doesn't seem possible. So that's contradicting your desire, and that's causing a lot of resistance. And so it's going to be very difficult for you to receive that $100,000. So you can see here with the two blue arrows that there's a break in connection here, that your vortex of desires is trying to send that to you, but because of resistance, you're blocking it. But it's still there, it's still knocking at your door, but you're still blocking it. So there's really no connection between the vibrational world and the five sensory world as far as your desires, because of your resistance that's blocking it. So now this person that's living by default, their thoughts now are coming from other people or experiences they see in the physical world, but it's not coming from the vibrational world. And a good way to tell is when it comes from the vibrational world, it comes in as a sign or signal and it feels good, as opposed to when it's coming from the five sensory world. A lot of times it doesn't feel that good, and also it feels like it's being forced. It doesn't feel easy. So now that you're thinking from these, your thoughts are coming from the five sensory world, now you're forced to take action. Meaning somebody wants you to do something and you feel like you're obligated and you have to do it. Like, let's say you don't really like your job, but you feel like you have to go. And so now you're forced to take action. Also, because of what somebody said, and you're now living by default, the five sensory world, now you tend to react. Again, the reaction just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good like a person that's living consciously and consciously manifesting their reality. So this person that's living by default, they still have new experiences, but it's through blood, sweat, and tears, or it's through blame, judgment, criticism, and anger. Now, a lot of times this may seem like a new experience, but most of the times what that is you're just repeating the same pattern. And these people are the ones that live most days the same as they did yesterday. When you're a conscious manifester, when the desires come to you and you're not resisting them and everything's already set up for you, everything just seems to fall into place and it feels good, as opposed to the five sensory world where you're forced to take action or react, and that's not a good feeling. So now you're in contrast, and the contrast is not feeling good. You feel unfulfilled and you're blaming other people for what's happening, and you just have no control over what's going on. And that's a bad place to be. So that's where the majority of people are. Maybe you can say 90% of the people. I imagine probably be more people, at least most people that are living this type of life. And instead of seeing the contrast as an opportunity where you can actually change and grow from that, they see it as something that's a negative, or something, or karma, or something that's bad happening to them, and then they're blaming, and then they lose control. So as this starts to come back around, and instead of going into desires, which eventually it does, but it's filtered back into the default world, and then it just cycles around there. Some of it goes back into desires because you're always going to have those desires, even if your experience in contrast was feeling very negative. You're always going to be asking, because anytime you experience something like that, you're always asking for something different and something better. So some of that does get filtered back into your vortex of desires, but most of it just gets filtered back around, and it just keeps cycling through the five sensory world. And then you just keep repeating the same cycle over and over again, and life just seems the same. It doesn't seem like it's really changing. As opposed to a person that's a conscious creator, they go from contrast right back into desires, and then they have a vibration again, but this vibration is different than what was sent from before. So they're always getting something new, because in the contrast mode, they're actually growing from that mode, and they can see where they can actually start adjusting or turn things around. And then that's a pretty good feeling that they're getting. And then it goes into desires, and then it cycles through. But again, when you're living by default, you never really get to that point. It just cycles around in the five sensory world, and you just get stuck in this loop. Okay, so that's a basic diagram what's going on. Of course, I'm going to go into a lot more detail in other videos with this, because this is going to take a lot more explanation what's really going on here. But basically, this is what happens. This is how it cycles through and comes back. Thanks for watching. To reiterate, I will make videos on each one of these modules to explain further. There is so much more to know. We all have been programmed from birth to live our lives from this physical world and not have very much control over what happens to us. Our parents were not conscious beings. I guarantee you, you learn this process of creating your life on purpose and with intention, and you will live an amazing, fulfilled life. You will be wealthy in finances, health, and in relationships. I am living proof of that. Live your life well, the way it was meant to be. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening.